So I wanted to talk about metaphor and how this new broad perspective from Atlas could show us what a new Persona game would really be about. This is also going to be my review of most gameplay mechanics in the game, and why generally I think this game is a very good step in the right direction, especially if you like JRPGs. I mean this in a very nice way, considering I am a big fan of Persona games. I've played both 3, 4, and 5. 1 and 2 don't exist to me, don't even question me. But if you like JRPGs, Persona games kind of leave a lot to be desired. I have played Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy IX. I tried out a lot of the Dragon Quests, and I will say, when you compare them to Persona, you realize that Persona is kind of shallow. And while I do like what they add, and their whole thing is the weak point system, and then nowadays it's when you kind of get to the more show times and stuff, but it's kind of boring, especially when you get into late game. But let me explain about it. Generally, Personas bring the weak point system and then they bring the time system. They're both fantastic. I gotta say, I really like the weak point system, but I also think the weak point system was done a lot better in Metaphor. And anyone can relate to this, but by the end of a Persona game, generally the main character is your most powerful guy, which I like. I enjoy this. But this also means that generally the weak point system encourage, or well, it also did encourage for 3 and 4, for just the main character just run fucking wild. Persona 5 added the baton system, and the baton system really helps so you can actually kind of pass it around. But generally, the main character can kind of just take care of everything, and then the late game is kind of just boring. But Metaphor kind of fixed this because there is no baton system. Instead, it's the more pass turn, and then it goes around in a circle. So generally, people with the highest agility will generally go first. And instead of hitting a weak point and getting to go again, you hit a weak point and then it still progresses the turn, but only at a half rate. This involves so much more thinking than the baton system because now if you pass and you hit certain weak spots, you can have enough turns to go around without wasting a turn so you can get to the attack you want. I think it leaves a whole new level of thinking and it makes you really actually have to process your options more than in Persona when you can just baton pass, get the damage buff, and bomb someone. But a lot of the same Atlas stuff is here. I played on hard mode, and I gotta say, the very beginning was a lot of hard, and a lot of encounters kind of went like this.
Forgive me.
Now this is like an Atlas special. Like the Atlas has been doing this since the beginning, and thankfully there's a really good like autosave system that all saves you always at like a little bit behind. Some people might think that's too easy. I think it's fine because sometimes a lot of bullshit happens, and they know that because they added the whole rewind system, which I think is really cool. Because instead of loading back, going back into the fight, maybe skipping the dialogue, you can just press one and now you're doing it again, and easy peasy, lemon squeezy. I like it. Yeah, I sure hope Persona 6 has the same kind of autosave system and it has the same kind of pass system because I gotta say Baton Pass gets really old really quick while this has a little more flexibility. And going into flexibility, we could talk about the archetypes. The archetype system, which is also the job system if you ever played a Final Fantasy, is pretty cool. I think generally it's a cool idea. I don't know how it would work in the Persona world, which is why they're probably not going to keep this system. But I do think there should be more flexibility between your party members in Persona, because a lot of the time there are some party members that just fucking suck. I'm looking at Mitsuru in Persona 3 Reload or Akihiko. I feel like both of them were just not very useful. Because then Koromaru just shows up and he has everything, so why wouldn't you use him? But here you can kind of use anyone. Though I actually haven't met the other party members in Metaphor, I know that the only thing that really changes between them is like kind of their base value stats. The way Heimse has high agility, or Stroll has high attack. You know what I mean? So I know the Persona games aren't or don't ever get difficult to the point where you have to like maximize your party. But then again, I wish there was more flexibility within those party members. And I know they kind of expanded this in Persona 3, where if you hanged out with them, they kind of got special effects, which made like Junpei into Crit Pay, as everyone called him. And I really like that idea. But what if it was like three subcategories, and then you can pick between them, and then So what if Junpei had one that made him really tanky? What if he had one that gave him the crit and like that kind of thing? So you have choices. I would really love to see that in Persona 6 because it lets the player have more choices and more options. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the dungeons. So I don't know if you could really call them dungeons and metaphors, 'cause, I mean, I guess they are, yeah. But the dungeons and metaphor also they all felt extremely different, and I know Persona has been slowly making dungeons even better. In 5, they're all very unique, and then generally they have their own gimmick, which they do in Metaphor too. But Metaphor also threw in a couple optional bosses along your way. Sometimes they gave you a split path, and I really love this because, um, again, giving the player more options and more like they can personalize everything. They can personalize their team, personalize their choices. I really like that because otherwise, the Persona games are kind of one and dones. Once you know the story, once you know all the characters, you don't really get anything. But Metaphor, I could see myself doing a challenge run and stuff because I have the choices to make that happen. So replayability goes up too. So again, giving the player choices is like one thing I really, really want to see in Persona 6. I also want to note that I actually called the metaphor persona system, or like what they do is when they tear out their heart. I actually called this, and I have friends that will back me up on this. I fucking called this, and it makes me really proud. I just had to announce it here. But generally, I want Persona 6 to have a lot of personal stuff, so I want you to have a lot of choices in it. I want there to be a lot of freedom. I want the JRPG elements to be expanded more, just like the way Metaphor did it, because if Persona 6 is a lot like Persona 5, or like if not even copied, I would be kind of disappointed because Metaphor now shows that they can do so much more. And if they're not just restricted to that IP. And I want to see the improvements. I want to see the stuff from Metaphor. And I want to see some new stuff. So I'm going to wrap this up. I want to see a lot more personal stuff happening in Persona 6. I want to see the combat system to be a lot more like Metaphor than it is Persona 5. I want the dungeons to be even more expanded upon because they're doing a really good job. And I gotta say, I do love Persona, I do love Metaphor, I don't hate either of these games. This is, of course, a discussion video, so I want you guys to tell me what you think. I want you to tell me what you expect. I want you to tell me what you want. But that should be it all. Stay tuned for the next one.